Good morning, everyone. I'm Jeremy Linden, and I'm Senior Director of Product Management here at Assimile, and I'll be your host for today's podcast. We have a special podcast today. Episode 4 brings our own CEO and founder, Shankar Somasundaram, to talk about cybersecurity awareness and encouraging health systems to focus on the key areas of IOMT risk management. Shankar is the CEO and founder of Assimile. We are a healthcare-focused company driving IOMT risk management with health systems of different kinds all around the country. And prior to Assimile, Shankar ran the connected devices business at Symantec's healthcare division and produced innovative solutions for small businesses and Fortune 500 companies. Shankar has spearheaded numerous medical device cybersecurity initiatives in the last decade and has contributed to regulatory frameworks and guidelines, including the NIST cybersecurity framework, the FDA pre-market and post-market guidances, and the AAMI cybersecurity practice guide for HTM professionals. Welcome, Shankar.
Thanks a lot, Jeremy. Glad to be here.
So every year in October, the National Cybersecurity Alliance focuses on specific areas to promote and create awareness on cybersecurity. And this year we have 4 themes: to be cyber smart, fight the phish, explore, experience and share awareness, and finally, making cybersecurity a priority. Now, with these themes in mind, let's explore some key insights from Shankar. First, as we know, our focus is on healthcare devices and ensuring that they're cyber healthy. We come across many devices and systems that have unfortunately the potential to really be a gold mine for threat actors. Can you share some security practices for these healthcare devices that can keep the patient, business, and data safe without compromising clinical efficacy?
Yeah, so I would say, the first thing to understand is cybersecurity is not some point in time that you practice today and you just stop practicing it tomorrow. It's actually something that you practice through the life of the device. And what that means is you got to think about cybersecurity from the time you think of buying a device to the time you actually let it out of your environment and decommission it and you sell it out. So what that means is you got to think of cybersecurity at procurement as the first step. That is the right way to do it. And how you do it, there are a number of ways to solve that problem. But the idea being that at procurement, you got to look at what is the cybersecurity risk posture of the device? What kind of configuration hardening can I actually implement for the device? What kind of mitigating control should I apply? What kind of firewall policy should I set in my network so that the device is not going to, call out to some external environment and infect my environment. So irrespective of, how you do it, again, I think the key aspect here is doing it at procurement is the first right step. And that is an important practice to follow because it also actually helps you meet some of the regulations in the industry. There are guidelines from Joint Commission and OCR that actually require you to do some of this as well. So not only is it a regulatory compliance, but it's also an important and healthy practice to follow to start with risk assessment at procurement. That's the first step when you actually look at cybersecurity for these devices. The second step is really once you have the device in your environment, and you connect it, then you got to assess the risk of the device on a periodic basis. You got to assess it from a vulnerability basis. You got to assess it from anomaly detection if there's any untoward event happening. You got to track the activity on the network. You got to see where it is moving around your network. You got to understand all the parameters. There's a ton of aspects here. But the idea is when you have connected the device on the network, you really have to make sure you're tracking it, you're managing the risk, and not just once every 6 months. We have seen certain environments and certain health systems who say, I'll do a yearly risk assessment, and then I will come back in the next year and I'll do another risk assessment. Cybersecurity is not a snapshot in time. While the risk assessment is good to do, you got to continue with the efforts through the year, and you got to continue to do it on a real-time basis. So that's the other second part, which once it's connected, you got to look at cybersecurity on a continuous basis. And then the third part is when you decommission the device. A lot of people think decommission, I'm done with it. There's no cyber risk anymore. The reality is there's still a lot of cyber risk there because there's protected health information in many of these devices, and you got to be careful in how you decommission it, how you're cleaning out the device, what is your decommissioning process. You might leave patients hanging, waiting for it because you decommissioned the device that was critical to your operation. So you got to take into account all the factors, the PHI, the business operations, all of it, before you decide to release a device completely out of your environment. So in essence, like cybersecurity goes across the entire life cycle. And it's a very important practice to think of cybersecurity at every stage, not to think of it as an isolation, as in some other team is going to manage it and they just come in once a while and look at it. It has to be ingrained in the overall processes. It has to be ingrained in your overall, methodology. And that can be done through technology and processes. It can be done through external services, through internal resources, however you want to do, but it has to go across end to end to achieve the objective.
Absolutely. And, that's something that we focus on here at Assimile, where, we try to take a holistic approach all the way from procurement through, management, all the way to decommissioning. Next, I want to talk a little bit about phishing. Phishing attacks and financial scams have really increased exponentially since the pandemic. And this year, we're actually looking at more than 80% of reported security incidents being able to be traced back to phishing attacks. We have a lot of campaigns about how, trying to emphasize email security, secure text messaging, reporting suspicious emails. But something doesn't really seem to be connecting, or at least I think there's some stuff we can do that's better. How do you think we can do better on this? Whether it's, healthcare devices running some kind of applications, or whether the incident comes from social media use on workstations that are being used alongside these healthcare devices. What do you think are some real tips that some of our audience would help be able to appreciate?
Yeah, I think this is an important piece, and I think phishing has become a way for ransomware to infect the devices and the environment as well. It's a common attack vector to get different kinds of malware that effectively then trigger ransomware. So it is a very important piece that is required in the environment. So I would say there are a few things that the health system can do. The first, of course, goes without saying, is training, top of the mind, right? I mean, you don't want to have somebody, just give out passwords and give out, usernames when somebody calls them and says, hey, there's an emergency, give me all the username passwords to the department. That just doesn't work, irrespective of how great your technologies are. You do something like that, you've compromised yourself there and there. You don't want somebody to say, oh, you know what, somebody just called me, they really needed our credit card and they needed my assistance, so I just gave it all out because it was such an urgent call. I mean, you need to have some level of security awareness and training, not to click on certain links which says, click here, there's a $50 discount on your next dinner. I mean, you don't want to be doing things like that, which effectively then opens up, irrespective of how great the technology is, it'll open up a can of worms in your organization. So I would say the first thing is training. And there's a lot of training modules out there that can actually solve this problem. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. If you go look at cyber hygiene training online, there's a ton of modules out there from a ton of companies that will effectively guide you. And we ourselves at Assimile, when we are with a customer, we always remind them that on top of technology, they have to follow certain processes, and we guide them on some of this as well. So that's step one. I think the second step, which is very important, is obviously inventorying everything. Because what we have noticed is that a lot of customers, they have certain rules and processes for certain devices in terms of what you can browse and emails you can check. But then they forget about the other devices in the environment. Those could be shadow IT. Those could be a medical device that they didn't know it was actually connected, a medical workstation. They treat it like an IT workstation. They start checking email on that. So you really need to have the context of the device, because some of it is highly contextual. And so having that inventory and classifying every device, understanding the data on the device, all of this is very important when you actually look at the phishing problem, because without that, you really don't have any context in the environment. And without the context, it's really hard to solve the problem. And then the third piece is obviously continuously monitoring. There are some devices and hardening it. There are some devices which don't need certain accesses. You don't need maybe to be checking your email on that medical workstation. I mean, that should not be happening. However urgent it is, you have to pick a different workstation to check it. You shouldn't be going and shopping on an ultrasound connected workstation. I mean, you cannot be doing certain things on certain devices. It ties back to the context, but it also ties back to what you are allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do, and tracking that and monitoring that in real time, so that you effectively make sure that certain applications and certain websites are not allowed from certain devices. And once you have the context of the device and people are trained and you're continuously monitoring, this is very much achievable. So it's a combination of training, education as well as technology and processes to ensure this has to happen. But I think collectively, if you take all of these actions, it'll go a long way in ensuring that you really bring down the risk in your environment.
Great. So last, I wanted to sort of talk about you a little bit. This month is really all about exploring cybersecurity and creating awareness, promoting the careers that are available in cybersecurity, and really ensuring that it remains a dynamic and exciting field to be in and to have to participate in and to work in. And you have an interesting background where it's pretty diverse. You come from an electrical engineering background. You've also had roles in finance and strategy as well. What do you think are some of the top skills that enabled you to be successful in cybersecurity that our friends in the HDO space can work on developing?
Yeah, I would say there are three things, that you need to really do to effectively become a lot deeper in cybersecurity. And these are things I still practice today. So, these have definitely helped me. I would say it's broadly true across any industry, but I think in cybersecurity, it's more so important than other industries because of the way cybersecurity is evolving. I'd say the first one is really, reading and absorbing information. And you got to read and absorb a ton of information if you got to learn cybersecurity. There is so much happening in cybersecurity all the time. But the interesting part is I've been looking at the cybersecurity space now, I would say, for 12, 13 years. And what I have noticed is that even though new attacks come in, the concepts in cybersecurity are broadly the same, that keep revolving. And there are only small evolution in concepts. But you got to understand a lot, and you got to just absorb everything like a sponge. A lot of people are worried to do that, are afraid to do that because they think either there's too much they won't understand, or they think, why should I even understand that because it's not part of my job. But I think to know cybersecurity, you got to understand everything. And a simple example is, at Symantec, we had so much resources that I pretty much went and read every possible white paper that was written by any division at Symantec. And for a year, I pretty much read and covered everything. It didn't matter which division it was. It didn't matter who wrote it. I used to read it. And if you are in the HTO space, you have a ton of resources. You have the resources, documents that are in your organization. You have a ton of vendors that are servicing you. Go ask your vendors to provide you information. I guarantee you every vendor will give you a ton of good information to read, which will really make you knowledgeable and it'll give you a ton of information that you need. So that's the first step, really to learn. Absorb, read, ask your vendors, read the white papers that are around you, read the frameworks, and you'll get a ton of information that you need to understand cybersecurity. The second piece is really creating a peer group that you can actually ask questions on. So this is something that has helped me always. For example, at Symantec, I had pretty much, architects, leaders, innovators from every business group, and there were quite a few business groups, but every little product, actually not just business group, every product that I had formed an association with. So I could call on anyone and everyone and ask them detailed questions on why it worked the way, what it did. And if you're in the HTO space, there are a ton of people in HTO who are learning at the same time, right? There are people in other HTOs who are also going through the same learning journey as you. If you go to one conference in the year, you'll find a ton of people who also want to network with other people in HTOs who want to learn from them. Again, you can always attend a webinar. You'll find people in that. So even if you don't have resources, you can find people. You can attend a ACC webinar, MD Expo webinar. Those are they don't cost anything to attend some of them. And you can attend, you can see who's attended. You can get the attendee list, write to them. So you can form a peer group. And when you form a peer group, you can ask a ton of questions to your peer group to understand, how they are thinking. And sometimes when you have people in the same boat as you who are learning as well, it actually enables you to learn faster. So that's the second thing I think you need to do, form a peer group and learn with them. And there's a lot of people in HTO learning this right now. So I think it's a great place to be if you want to learn. And then the last piece is really keeping at it and being persistent. I think persistence in cybersecurity is very important. Sometimes the concepts are very alien. They seem very hard. But if you keep looking at it, you'll get it. And the other part of cybersecurity is you can't really stop learning. Even today, I think I've spent a lot of time reading a lot, understanding a lot. But even today, I read out every framework. I read every paper that I can with whatever time is there, because there's always something new getting published. Some of these are old concepts rehashed. sometimes it's a completely new concept and you got to understand it. But if you keep at it and if you keep reading, you'll find that it gets easier and easier. What would have taken you 5 hours to learn will now take only half an hour to learn. And you'll read faster, you learn better, and you'll be able to tie the pieces much better than anybody else. So I would say reading a lot, absorbing a lot, forming the peer group, and then being persistent about it, keeping that continuously as part of your educational cycle. I would say these three, if you cultivate, I think, very soon, the people at HTO, whoever follows us, will be a cyber expert, will be driving the rest of the industry. And with the medical device knowledge that a lot of people already have, I think it would be an unbeatable combination.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, from my side, I definitely think that, understanding the details and understanding the why, having that kind of a curiosity to want to understand the why, I think is super important, because even if something might be one level of technical below what you actually need to solve the problem, it often understanding that gives you so much more context. And one thing I'm definitely glad that nowadays there's a lot more opportunities for people to learn through formal or relatively informal options that weren't there before. So that's really nice. So this brings us to the end. So thank you, Shankar, for being here and sharing some of your wisdom, and thank you for continuing to innovate in the world of IoMT cybersecurity. For anyone listening, if you have any questions or you want to learn more about Assimile, you can contact us at info@assimile.com. Until then, take care and see you next time.